Hello, good afternoon. It's afternoon here. So quickly we want to run through the key innovations in the Companies and Allied Matters Act 2020. The Companies and Allied Matters Act, that is the CAMA, it's the equivalent of the Companies Act in the UK, right? So it is the law that regulates companies and the activities of corporate organizations in Nigeria. I'll just run through a couple of innovations that the CAMA 2020 has introduced, which essentially is to make the mode of doing business easy in Nigeria. So, first, there's now a single shareholder and single director companies. Under the old CAMA, it wasn't possible to have just one shareholder and just one director in a company. But under the new CAMA 2020, which is not really new anymore, it is now possible to have one shareholder and one director in the company. This is, however, available for small companies, right? So just for small companies, and there's a way small companies have been defined, beg your pardon, under the Act, right? So if you want to have exclusive control of your company, you can now do that under the new CAMA. Secondly, small companies have been redefined. I just said at the beginning that single shareholders, single directors for companies are only applicable to small companies. Now, small companies have been redefined. The threshold for defining small companies has increased, right, to enable more companies qualify as small companies and therefore enjoy the benefits conferred on small companies by the CAMA 2020, right? Under the former act, a small company was a company that, amongst other criteria, had a turnover of not more than 20 million naira and a net asset value of not more than 1 million naira. But interestingly, under the new CAMA, a small company is a company that, in addition to the other criteria that existed under the repealed CAMA, has a turnover of not more than 120 million naira and a net asset value of not more than 60 million naira. Right. So, and of course, there are some additional benefits that small companies would enjoy, which, for example, includes the fact that they do not have to hold annual general meetings, they do not have to appoint directors, and it is not compulsory for a small company to have a company secretary. There are also some innovative electronic innovations. This is number three. Under the CAMA 2020, companies' records can be maintained in an electronic format. Electronic share transfer forms will be acceptable by all companies. A private company may hold its general meeting electronically via Zoom, Teams, Share, and all the other digital modes of holding meetings. So instead of what used to obtain in under the previous law, where you have to convey a physical meeting and shareholders, we have to travel all the way down to attend and all of that. Under the new law, you can now hold your meetings as a private company electronically. In addition to the notice given personally or by post, notice may also be given by electronic email to any member provided who has provided the company with an electronic email address. This really makes life easy for everybody. And also, any document required to be annexed to the annual return may be delivered to the Corporate Affairs Commission either in hard copy or in soft copy. Again, interestingly, the fourth innovation under the CAMA 2020 is that there is no longer a concept of authorized share capital. Instead, companies are now required to ensure that they maintain the minimum issued share capital. This is very important, required under the CAMA 2020, and that a quarter of their issued share capital is paid up. I mean, the aim of this amendment is essentially for the share capital of the company to provide for a more realistic reflection of the true state of affairs with which with respect to the capital of the company that has actually been issued and paid up. Right, the concept of authorized share capital did not reflect this. So you have a situation where a company has an authorized share capital of 1 million, and I mean the only shares that has been issued is just 100. You have 900 outstanding shares unissued. So you really can't tell what the capital base of the company is. So what this new law has done is to erase every reference to authorized share capital. You now have minimum issued share capital. The minimum issued share capital for a private company is 100,000 naira, while the minimum issued share capital for a public company is 2 million naira. Right. Then there are now also under this is number five, new corporate structures. Under the new CAMA, you have new entities that have been introduced into the Nigerian company law. You now have the limited partnerships. In another discussion, we'll talk more about what this means. You now have the limited liability partnerships, right? These new forms of partnership will provide more options for investors seeking to structure their holdings in Nigerian businesses, as well as private equity and venture capital fund managers who typically adopt such methods, right? So this is very important. Um, Now the next point I'll just quickly mention here is the issue of financial assistance for companies. Financial assistance by companies are not lawful, are now lawful, right? They are now lawful. So financial assistance, but of course there are exceptions. Financial assistance by companies in relation to the acquisition or proposed acquisition of shares will now be permitted where one, it is effected pursuant to a court order or to a court sanctioned scheme of arrangement, merger, or restructuring. Two, where the principal purpose of giving the assistance is not to reduce or discharge any liability incurred by a person for the purpose of acquiring shares in the company or its holding company, but rather is incidental to a larger purpose of the company, and the assistance is given in good faith in the interest of the company with respect to private companies. Financial assistance for the acquisition of shares of a private company or a subsidiary of a private company is now permitted subject to certain conditions. It must be approved by a special resolution. The net assets of the company must not be reduced, or if they will be reduced, the assistance must be provided from distributable profits. I believe you know what that means. And the directors of the company must make a statutory declaration before the financial assistance is provided by the company. These additional exceptions, especially those applicable to private companies, are a welcome development, particularly in relation to companies seeking to raise much needed capital, and which may, for example, be required to provide certain indemnities to investors in connection with capital raise, right? Again, there's also now an updated insolvency test for companies. The test for insolvency, that is the inability to pay debts as they fall due, has been increased from 2,000 under the former act to 200,000 naira to reflect present day realities. But it is important to also mention here quickly that under the business, there's a new law, right? The um, business under the business I beg your pardon, under the Business Facilitation Act, right? Under the Business Facilitation Act 2023. It's a very new law. I needed to check again the citation. It's a 2023 law. Under the Business Facilitation Act, it has been provided that this threshold will be as determined by the CAC from time to time. Under the previous law, it was 2,000 naira. And before 2020, when the law was amended, the CAMA, before it was amended, 2,000 naira made absolutely no sense because of the incidences of inflation and all of that. So it is important that the amounts or the figures are as amended or reviewed by the regulator from time to time. So this is one thing that the new law has provided for. We are going to